No, you can start when you want.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. We are Jorge, Hector, Sergio, and me, Marina, and we are going to talk about the topic assigned to us, Agile architecture. We are going to cover some topics, which is what is Agile architecture, its roles and hierarchies, the Agile teams, and the Agile architecture process. What is Agile architecture? I could find some different definitions. One is a set of values, practices, and collaborations that support the active evolution. I don't know how to speak English. I'm sorry. Evolutionary design and architecture of a system. This one could be a bit messy, so I found another one. How an enterprise system of software architect apply architectural practice in Agile software development. Agile architecture can have different scopes, from single applications to a family of applications, such as an ERP or an infrastructure as big as the internet. Some characteristics of Agile architecture is that it evolves over time, it avoids delays associated with waterfall processes, it ensures that the system always runs and finds balance between emergent design and intentionality. I will present you this quote, which is from Gregor Hope, which is the author of the articles that our professor recommended us. And it says, Agile methods are the car's steering wheel, not the gas pedal. It means it compares Agile methodologies or processes to steering wheels of the car that lead the project, giving it flexibility. It does not mean that the architecture will be fast. It means that it will be flexible. To ride a vehicle, you need fuel, but you also need a steering wheel and other parts. That's what it means.
And I'm Hector, and I'm going to talk a bit about roles. To remember the roles in Agile, we have team members and how an architect fits, and the role that an architect plays in an Agile team. We'll have a section later. We have the product owner, who is the one who gives directions, and he should be the one steering the wheel. If we take, for example, the car analogy, and the destination would be the maximization of value of your product for the stakeholders, who are the users or customers or governance. Then, depending on how you apply Agile, you could also have team leads, Scrum Masters, lead architects. It depends a bit on the methodology that you're using. And then there's the supporting cast, who are technical experts, domain experts, independent testers. Can you go to the next slide,
yes,
please? Thank you. And hierarchy is a bit different in an Agile environment because you aim to reduce bureaucracy, because you need to react to changes faster. And this is why you usually have a hierarchy of architects. For example, you have the enterprise architects, which are more focused on the strategy, the solution architects, which are middle ground between strategy and technical. And then there's the technical architects. You also sometimes have data architects. And it's very important that there's frictionless communication and that there are no blocks in the decisions, and that everyone participates in them, so that you don't create a situation where the top is deciding something that makes no sense to implement technically. Then teams in Agile aim to be self-organizing, which is the 11th principle of Agile, which says that the best architectures, requirements, and design emerge from self-organizing teams. And then around the steering decisions, it's very important that they come from inside the car. Well, in the car analogy, that they come inside the car, from inside the car. because you wouldn't want an external one just grabbing the wheel and taking those decisions, because they are probably far removed from the developing process, and they probably won't be able to maximize the value and understand all the constraints that are there. And now teammate is going to talk about this.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to be a good Agile architect, and I have here some topics I want to discuss because I think they are like a little bit controversial. For example, should an architect be part of the development team or just doing his job, that is the architecture of project? And I think it's very useful that the architect is in constant communication with the development team because he can get like information and feedback from the development team, and this is very useful for him to improve the architecture of his project. And also I want to talk about future, and that's the key of Agile architecture. And this is because I know that future is unpredictable, but it is good to make the application as well as you can in terms of adaptability to the possible future changes. And so if there is a change on the future and you have to change something in your architecture, you're gonna save a lot of time. Another topic is speed, and this is because some architects can think that as soon as they submit their project, it's gonna be better for them, and I think it's wrong, because I think it's a good way to do the project in an iterative way and delivering like several versions of the project. And this is going to be also useful because you can get feedback from users and you can improve the project through several versions. And to finish, I want to talk about documentation. This is because an architect should think that it's better to write a lot of documentation, but I think if you can explain something in 1 page, for example, it's better than explaining it in 3 pages. And if you can explain it with a diagram, it's gonna be even better. Okay, so I think it's good to know not to over document your project. And now my partner Jorge is going to talk about Agile Teams.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Agile Teams. Like we said before, an architecture needs a leader, what we call an architect in this case, and also have teams, Agile Teams. There are several scenarios to organize a team in Agile architecture. These are just 3 of them. And the first one that you can see here is when the architect is outside the team, just manages and decides the work that is going to be done and how it's going to be done. But this is not a recommended approach, because the architect, as he's not working directly in the project, he doesn't have much feedback on the development itself. Then the other case is when the architect it's inside the team. It's like the other one, but he actually works in the development of the project or the product you're developing. But he still makes decisions, he manages the team. And then the last one is when there is no need to have one single architect. There can be several architects, for example, there can be 2 or 3, and they will take the decisions in common, and you will have a more self-managed and self-organized team. But as we said before, there has to be always at least one architect, because the team cannot be cannot work on his own without someone having the lead. And also the architect role can rotate. Several members of the teams can be the architect during the during the whole process. So if you can pass to the next slide, please. And then I also wanted to talk about the different work approaches we can take depending on the project we're going to develop. There are many, but these are just two of them. The first one, architecture-driven approach. In this approach works well when we have an architecture with a high cohesion and low coupling, when each subsystem of the architecture just does one thing and does not depend too much on the other parts. So as I said, we have to identify each part, each subsystem, and each member of the team will just focus on that part. But as this is an agile architecture, these parts may evolve. Probably they will evolve over time. So it's important to have, but I think it's important to have these parts identified before starting to work, because I think it's a good way to start. And then the other approach that is like the most common in agile architectures is a more incremental method, more incremental approach, and works well by like when there is a low cohesion and a high coupling. In this case, each member of the team implements just one feature at a time. But as there is a high coupling, it's important to have a great coordination between the team members, because as they are working in parallel, these implementations that they are doing, each member can collide and can cause problems in the project. And that's all for my part.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the steps of the Agile architecture process. It's very brief. First of all, we'll start with the envision of the initial architecture. This means that at least the architecture owner team that is responsible of envisioning presents the project to the sub-teams for feedback. In bigger projects, this step is done, but more team members, included the product owner and even the key project stakeholders. This process has can take different time, from several days to several weeks. The second step would be working with the development teams. It's parallel to the third one. Depending on the magnitude of the problem, the architecture owner team can take active roles on the other sub-teams or simply use them as consultants. Third step is communicating the architecture to the architectural stakeholders. It is an exchange of information between architectural stakeholders, product owner, and the rest of the development team. The aim is to completely understand the architectural vision. And last but not least, the last step is updating architectural work products. It is done on frequent, short meetings during the project where the members of the different teams discuss changes and improvements of the architecture. And that's all. If you have any questions that I know you have,